Jacob Albracht, Tommy Castor. This is Sports Daily on Wichita's #1 sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, welcome in, everybody. Sports Daily. Wow. Tommy Castor alongside me here. I'm Jacob Albracht, and we are getting breaking news on this conference realignment as we get into the top of the hour here. Buckle up, everybody. It's going to be a wild day. Probably everybody wants to get things done before the end of the weekend, and it all could break here while we're on the air. We'll get you the latest on that here in just a minute. A lot going on there. We have a lot going on this program today. The Royals, they're going streaking. Now 6 in a row, 2 sweeps in a row, and on the road to Philadelphia. We'll see if Kansas City can keep things going. We also have some giveaways today. We'll give away some HTO. We'll give away some WindSurge vouchers, and we'll give away some tickets to Def Leppard, Motley Crue, and Alice Cooper in Tulsa. Rock and roll fans, stay tuned. We'll get you that chance to win. We've got a pair of those tickets to give away today. Lots of great stuff coming up. The IHOP hotline is open. Jad Chambers is manning that and driving the ship for us. 869-1240. Appreciate you listening to us on KFH. As always, or on the Odyssey app, or in a time machine if you are back listening to us on demand in a podcast form on the Odyssey app. Also appreciate you watching our video stream here on Facebook, YouTube, and now Twitch. And if you want to find our video stream on YouTube and Twitch, just search KFH Radio, and you'll see us right there front and center as we've been having fun with the video stream now a few months into streaming. Looking forward to getting that thing rocking and rolling during football season. Tommy, good morning. How are you?
It's wild. It's a wild, crazy Friday morning. And I was driving in this morning, and all of a sudden my phone starts blowing up with tweets and reports and all of this stuff about conference realignment. And there were a lot of developments last night, it seemed like, and it's only intensifying this morning. So, man, I'm excited to get into it today.
It is wild. Okay, so we've got a couple of things that have got to happen. We've got to get you caught up from last night and then into today. This is where this gets really strange. So as we're looking around, going back and forth, it looked like the Pac-12 was in real trouble, right? The general consensus was that the Big 12 presidents got together and said, yes, we'll take Arizona, that Arizona was the word we kept hearing, leaning to the Big 12. And then the question became what happens with Arizona State and potentially Utah, that Oregon and Washington were considering partial shares of the Big 10 that would put them slightly over the Big 12 deal, but certainly under their peers in the league, which, a disclaimer, that is never a good idea. Because you're already at a competitive disadvantage at that point against the teams that you play against. So that never made sense to me. So now what we've got this morning is literal last-minute stuff, and everybody's reporting this now. All the major college, athletics writers that have been on this from the beginning. The general news is that a last-minute push overnight and a meeting this morning could end up keeping the Pac-12 together and signing that Apple deal. Okay, and everybody's reporting that. So it's like this, you know the meme where the Undertaker sits up out of the coffin, like that. That's the Pac-12 right now, and it's it's interesting. Let me say this first. I think it's pretty cool, the nostalgia and the level of love these schools have for the Pac-12. I appreciate that, and I like that. So if they hold this thing together, good for them. But it will not be the best decision, I don't think, for a school like Arizona. I don't know what to think about Washington and Oregon because they really are in this purgatory. And so I maybe that's what the Pac-12 goes into is like, guys, nobody has an overwhelmingly positive offer here. There's a chance that we could get this Apple deal up close to the Big 12. And I'd be curious to see how long the Apple deal is, Tommy. But I just don't think they're going to get the kind of eyeballs they think they're going to get to incentivize that deal to get it up there. So the question becomes for like Arizona, if the Apple deal's $25 million and the Big 12 deal's $31 million, for Arizona, is that difference alone and the eyeballs and exposure, right, enough to break off from what has been your athletic existence for almost 50 years now and, disrupting the Arizona State thing, all that? Is that little bit of a jump worth it? And my guess is if Arizona knows Washington and Oregon and everybody's sticking together and they would probably expand in that environment, that they're like, that's not enough for us to make this sort of earth-shaking move.
It should be enough to get them to move, but I don't think it will be. If you lay out that scenario like you just described, because of the nostalgia involved in it. And I think it's going to ultimately end up being like the Pac-12 network all over again. There's going to be these promises that with the number of eyeballs and subscribers on Apple, that they're going to be able to make even more money than the 25 million. And I just don't think that's going to come to fruition. I'm not sure that that's realistic. I think that if Arizona walks away from a Big 12 deal where they would be paid a full share, $31 million a year, if they walk away from that to stay in a conference that, number one, you're getting less money, and number two, the future is still uncertain. I mean, let's be real here. Even if all the schools sign this grant of rights and the Pac-9 stick together, the future is still uncertain for the conference. And basically, you're kicking the can down the road, and you might be doing this all over again in a number of years, with no guarantee that the conference is going to be in any stronger than it is right now. So I think that, if they walk away from this opportunity, that's pretty short-sighted in my mind. I understand the nostalgia, but we've talked all along about how this entire thing, this conference realignment episode, it's all business. It's a business decision, and you can't let nostalgia play into it. When you go back to a business decision, I understand why the reporting is there this morning that Oregon and Washington to the Big Ten probably isn't going to happen because they're going to be getting a half share in the Big Ten. And then you look at the travel expenses from the West Coast, it doesn't make it financially feasible or nearly as feasible to go ahead and make that jump. So I get that. From a business perspective, I understand why Washington and Oregon are pausing a bit when it comes to the Big Ten. I don't understand if Arizona ends up sticking around, why they would.
Well, what if Arizona's travel expense is just half of the increase of Washington and Oregon? At that point, they have a net, they're basically, they've made no progress financially. So from a business perspective, and I don't know what if the travel expenses from Washington and Oregon to the Big Ten would be $10 million a year, which is what we've heard they reported, or what's been reported is what they calculated, then I would think Arizona to the Big 12, it would be reasonable to think that would be half of that, $5 million, then a $5 million increase. And at that point, you've made no more money in the Big 12 deal. So I get that, right? Like that doesn't affect Colorado quite as much. Colorado's geographically a lot closer. And so, I think that it will be, it won't be a win for the Pac-12 because they still got fleeced on the deal. But I do think, and I've told you this from the beginning, I don't want to see the Pac-12 die. I like the Pac-12. They've handled this very poorly, and it gets messy. Conference realignment always does, because what happens in conference realignment is everybody beats their chest and wants to feel like they're the most important and the best, right? We're the best. We're the most important. We're so much better than you guys. You should join. It's what the Pac-12 felt like when the Big 12 came calling when Texas and Oklahoma left. It's how the Big 12 feels now that the Pac-12 needs a little help. It's what the ACC will feel when the reality is the SEC's better. And the Big Ten, because they've, gotten big and done the right things, is better. But the reality is, like, Michigan and Ohio State are better. I don't know how much better anybody else is in that league. But
Rutgers is better and Northwestern is better.
But what happens in these realignments is everybody wants to feel the most important, and everybody gets nasty and like, oh, God, why would you want to stay in the Pac-12? Well, because they've been there for 50 years, and that's all their fans know. It's like, why would, go back. Why would Texas A&M want to go to the SEC, right? Like, you got to put that stuff aside when you talk about conference realignment to try and understand the perspective like administrators have when they're trying to approach this. They're trying to position their university the best that they possibly can. If the Pac-12 can get Arizona $25 million a year plus escalators, and the Big 12 can get Arizona $31 million a year, and you're incurring $5 to $6 million more a year in travel, there is no incentive to leave if you're Arizona, other than trying to look to the future now. And that's where I would think this gets even more difficult on Arizona, because right now the long-term future for the Big 12 looks much brighter than it does even if the Pac-12 stays together, because of two things. And I don't know what the length of the Apple deal is, so we'll have to see that. But one, the linear television eyeballs are going to strengthen the Big 12. The Big 12 will expand its footprint one way or the other, whether it's Arizona or UConn. Like, the Big 12 is still going to go and get a little bit bigger with whatever it is that they do. And I think that at the end of the day, it will be not that big a deal. Like, let's say the Big 12 added San Diego State instead of Arizona. That stings because Arizona's a Power 5 right now, and we think of it that way. But the reality is those programs aren't that far apart, and you're getting San Diego media market instead of Phoenix. A difference, but, not a massive one. Let's say the Big 12 added, some of the teams that, and it may become a race for some of these Mountain West schools, by the way, because the Pac-12, I would assume, will certainly want to expand in this environment, or they're going to be going back through this right over again. But if those are the situations, like in the short term, there probably isn't that much of a difference. The linear eyeballs matter and will matter, but does it matter enough to disrupt everything? I don't know. Apparently not, if this reporting this morning is true and everybody's on it, so I assume that it is. But you have to look bigger picture than that. And the next deal that the Big 12 gets, right? Let's say the Big 12 adds UConn or really anybody, or let's just say they don't add anybody, and the Pac-12 doesn't add anybody, and they can both come to the table again at about the same time. It would be very interesting to see those two deals side by side. I don't know if there's much of a difference right now, but the elephant in the room, Tommy, is right now the Big Ten is offering Oregon and Washington a partial share. If that ever changes, and Oregon and Washington, instead of deciding on, $35 million with a $10 million travel difference, if that goes up to $50 million, they're going to leave. So if you're Arizona, you have to say, okay, in the short term, it's negligible for us to join the Big 12 and not worth it. Okay. But what about when Oregon and Washington leave, which will happen eventually? If the Big Ten wants them, and somebody I think will, whether it's the Big 12, and the Big 12, $31 million, they got a great media deal compared to their last one, but it's not this overwhelming number yet. But even if it was down the road and the Big 12 decided, you know what, this next media deal looks pretty good, let's add Oregon, in 2031, then Arizona could get left behind. So it's sort of like you have to make the call now, right? And that's where these meetings matter and everything
Take
else.
the best offer now. Take the most money now, because that's the only thing.
We don't know that it's the most money.
That's the only thing that's guaranteed. I mean,
it's the most
that's
eyeballs.
The only thing that's guaranteed.
It's the most eyeballs.
The $31 million a year is guaranteed a full share to the Big 12 members. Anything above in the mid-20s that the Pac-12 is selling with an Apple deal is not guaranteed. It's all going to come down to eyeballs and subscribers.
No. It's guaranteed at that point, and then there's escalators, the way I understand it. So it starts at 25 and could go up.
Right.
20.
So everything else from that mid-20s upward is not guaranteed money. So take the guaranteed money on the table at 31 with
travel
the Big 12.
Cost make the, like that. That was an interesting thing that got brought up by Washington and Oregon.
I don't know. I feel like Arizona to the other schools in the Big 12 isn't as big of a deal as Washington's travel costs.
It's
going to the Big 10. Like they're different.
But if Arizona to Lubbock,
Arizona to Boulder, Arizona, like those things aren't, that huge of a deal, where Washington to Maryland is, like that's cross country.
Now, Tommy, you have to think about Arizona to UCF, Arizona to Cincinnati, Arizona to West Virginia, Arizona to Houston.
You can schedule it however you need to. Like there are ways that you can schedule this. If it's a division type thing, if it's a pod type thing, like you can set up divisions to make it work and to make it so the travel is a little bit better for, because UCF is going to be in the same boat, so, and they haven't raised,
but they're making such a jump. They're making such a jump financially that it's not as big a deal. I don't know what the travel cost would be. I don't know. Maybe we could ask Kevin Saul the next time he's on, like try to guess if it cost Washington $10 million a year to travel to the Big 10, what would it cost Arizona to travel to the Big 12? I think it's reasonable to say it could be half of that. And if it's half of that, then you've got a wash in money, not in eyeballs, but then who knows what those escalators look like too. We haven't seen the escalators, by the way. Like how much of an escalator or how much of a threshold is there? Are they easy to reach? Are they hard to reach? I think the reality that may be staring us in the face right now is that if Washington and Oregon stay, everybody will stay. And they are the most important members, I would say. Those two and Arizona would be your three most high-profile brands left. What's really interesting in this, Tommy, is that Colorado already left.
Yeah.
Like, what? Yeah. They're like, that's interesting. Now, I think they made the best move for Colorado because the travel on Colorado is not that big a deal, right? Kansas State, Iowa State are all pretty close. And then, whatever. But that was interesting to see that happen. And to see, like, looking back in retrospect, the Pac-12, like, yeah, all right, we don't really care.
And know what's crazy in this right now is, like, I've got ESPN on in the background, and they're still, like, on the ticker at the bottom, Arizona in final steps to join the Big 12. So like this is all happening like right now, and you've got guys like Brett McMurphy, Brett McMurphy and Ross Dellinger from SI, and like others that are Dan Wetzel. They're all reporting that there might be, pump the brakes a little bit on this. In my mind, I think what is going on here, I think there's a couple things at play. I think you've got number one, Oregon and Washington evaluating the financials and realizing a half share in the Big 10 is probably not the best fit for them right now. So I think that's part of it. I think that's kind of the start of it. I wouldn't be surprised if the Arizona Board of Regents, this has been speculated for a while, they want both Arizona and Arizona State in the same conference. We talked about it yesterday. And Arizona State all along they've not been receptive to the idea of the Big 12. They've been bullish on the Pac-12. Their president is on record saying that he is fully committed to the Pac-12. So there could very easily be a scenario where this isn't in the hands of the University of Arizona. This is in the hands of the Arizona Board of Regents. And they're deciding that if Arizona State doesn't want to go, Arizona, you aren't going either. And that's the scenario that we had painted as recently as 24 hours ago, or at least I had suggested 24 hours ago that could be on the table. I think it is right now. If all that plays out and it ends up being the Pac-9 at that point sticking together, then I think you're in a position where they can go back to San Diego State, get to 10 schools, and then maybe the Big 12 turns its focus to UConn. And then you've got your 14 in the Big 12. So there are contingencies in place, I think. But man, this is a shocking turn of events.
We gotta let's take a break and then let's talk about taking the Apple deal, if that's the way this goes, and what that might mean. I mean, it is a lifeboat to the commissioner, but is it nonsense for them if they go that route? That's what we'll talk about next. If it stays together, which again, I mean, like, everybody has the same report all within 5 or 10 minutes. So whoever the source on this is telling everybody that they can, as fast as they can, that this is happening. My guess is it's the Pac-12. But, you know, this is really, really interesting. We're going to take a quick break. The IHOP hotline's open, 869-1240. Why would you take the Apple deal? We'll look into that as we make our way through this breaking news situation here on a story we've been following for, I don't know, like 8 months now on Sports Daily. All right, welcome back in, everybody. Boy, this is wild. Okay, so now we're going to go to some, bloggers. So on Twitter, Jason Shear writes wildcatauthority.com. So just somebody that follows more boots on the ground. Says Arizona was still planning to go to the Big 12 after last night's meeting. Coaches were informed and it was full steam ahead. We've said it's not over till it's over, but it would still be one of the most shocking turnarounds I've seen. Then Chris Cartman, who works for 24/7 Sports for SunDevilSource.com. So these are, like we use Tim Fitzgerald. These would be writers like that are really boots on the ground here. He says just a few minutes ago that Arizona is doing everything it can to leave, but the Board of Regents wants the schools to be together and has authority. Michael Crow, I don't know who that is
the president of Arizona
more,
State.
Who's that?
The president of Arizona State.
Okay, so Michael, the president there, is pushing for more consideration. Pac-12 is meeting this morning on a grant of rights. It's getting very messy. Crow, the Arizona State president, has always preferred the Pac-12 to stay together. So that gives us a little perspective on this as far as Arizona goes, that, perhaps Arizona does want to go, but they're getting blocked a little bit. So we'll get more into that. Let's jump to the IHOP hotline here. Robert wants to chat about realignment. Robert, welcome into Sports Daily. What's on your mind?
A couple of quick things on just what you said there, actually. That Crow guy from Arizona State, he was supposedly a big supporter of Larry Scott, the former Pac-12 commissioner who kind of got him in this mess. So he's always been going in that direction, just for background on him. On a couple things, like adding UConn for the Big 12, I just don't see why they would do that. It just doesn't seem to make sense at all. And and like you said, the money is guaranteed in the Big 12 for Arizona and the other schools. As long as they're Power 5 schools, everything's pro rata. They can get it in and get the $31 million. Whereas the Big 10, they don't have that same deal. That's why they can only offer a partial deal. But if I was Oregon and Washington, I would immediately take that deal, because the next deal is you're going to be full members and part of the planning. And so at that point, you're really going to make up the money.
Yeah, I wonder, part of it, Robert, is that, not only the travel expenses, I was thinking about this just a couple minutes ago, not only the travel expenses from Oregon and Washington to the other teams in the Big Ten, but then the added travel expenses potentially from the current Big Ten teams to go out to the West Coast. They're already going to USC and UCLA. And will they have to schedule more trips to Oregon and Washington? And it makes me wonder if, part of this is maybe the current Big Ten teams are saying, well, maybe hold on, maybe we don't want Oregon and Washington. And that might be as much as Oregon and Washington saying this might not be a great fit.
That could be, but I think people probably overestimate the travel portion of it. I think that got dismissed long ago when SC and UCLA came in. If you're going to go travel, you might as well travel. You could do a long, a weekend or an extra, a double trip from down there to up there and hit those. And the same for those schools. They have ways to figure that out. Air travel is what it is. It's still 1,500 miles from Tucson to Seattle. That's less than going to Lawrence, or that's more than going to Lawrence, Kansas for that team.
I think that on the travel thing, it's as much that, like, if you're the other Big Ten members, you just, you don't want to even Oregon and Washington. You don't want an even playing field for those schools if you're going to have to then incur more to do it. But honestly, it makes it a little easier on your travel because USC and UCLA are already there, right? Those teams can all play each other, and that lessens the need to get out there. It is very strange. There is all kinds of stuff. So there's a Twitter feed, MHVER3. Now, this person doesn't have any affiliation, but has been moderately connected and has decent information. His thought on this and what he's heard. And again, I don't know how big of a disclaimer we can make or put on this stuff, but disclaimer, right? That there is so much noise when it comes to realignment. But he's hearing that Arizona does want to go, right? And that Arizona State is close to wanting to go, but needs more time. And maybe this is a stall tactic as Arizona State has to make the call. Pressure's on Arizona State and that Arizona wants to go. And that's what we were about to get into with Arizona is the Apple deal dollars and cents. But we knew this all along. This isn't new information, Tommy. We suspected the Apple deal or whatever the streaming deal was probably going to get pretty close to the Big 12 number. But the problem for programs like Arizona, who do emphasize athletics, maybe a little more than some of the Pac-12 schools, we appreciate the call, Robert, by the way, is that your exposure in that is not nearly as high. Here's the reality of the Apple TV deal, Tommy. I don't know if Pac-12 fans want to hear this or not, but it's the reality of the situation. If they go to Apple TV, the only people that will watch their games are people that already like those teams and follow those teams. So two things. You're banking on those people having Apple TV, caring enough to buy Apple TV if they don't, but nobody else is going to buy Apple TV or watch your games anymore. The days of Pac-12 after dark, the days of, yeah, that's on. It's late at night. I'm a degenerate. I want to look at something. I want to bet on something, whatever, that's gone with Apple TV. Nobody's going to buy Apple TV to watch Pac-12 football. I'm sorry, but that's the harsh reality of it. And so there's going to be a trickle effect there, right? Now you've put yourself, if you're Arizona, very much in the world that Wichita State exists, right? It's much harder now to get national eyeballs on your program. And man, do the Shockers value and appreciate when they get on national TV versus ESPN Plus, right? That's a big deal for a school like Wichita State. It's a big deal for the Mountain West. But your profile at that point with streaming only becomes very much more like the next tier of schools who are fighting for those national eyeballs constantly, right? And that's where, if you're Arizona, in my opinion, or Arizona State or whoever, you've got to look at an Apple deal and be like, guys, like this is not the path right now to keep us with what we need to be. Because if the TV networks aren't that into you right now, they are not going to be that into you if you're coming out of a streaming only deal where you've lost any sort of national momentum. A streaming only deal, Tommy, will kill Oregon and Washington on the recruiting trail, on the big picture future stuff. Like, streaming is the future. I think we all know that. But what we're seeing now in the world of television is this harsh reality that, man, if I stream all of this different stuff, I'm spending just as much as I used to spend on my cable bill. Well, why do you think that is? Because it's expensive. That's why cable's expensive. And now that these streaming companies aren't giving these insane, promotional discounts anymore, and you're getting like the real price, it's like, God. So like you're just like, nobody's going to buy Apple TV to watch Pac-12 football. It's not like Amazon getting into the NFL. People will buy Amazon so that they can watch Thursday night NFL football. They just will, right? Nobody is going to buy Apple TV to watch Pac-12 football games that come on where you live at midnight. Not going to happen.
It's the exact same thing over a decade ago when the Pac-12 network came around. Nobody bought the Pac-12 network. It was not included in basic cable sports packages in a lot of places, and you had to purchase it. Nobody bought it unless you were a fan of those schools on the West Coast. Nobody in New York or Georgia or Kentucky or Texas or North Dakota or Kansas, for that matter, said, you know what? I'm going to upgrade my cable plan so I can get the Pac-12 network. That didn't happen. Didn't happen at all. And the promises were there that, okay, we get more subscribers and more eyeballs on our product. We can make more money off this network. And it never came to fruition. This is the second coming of that. And so if these presidents are foolish enough to buy that narrative and to stick around in the Pac-10, Pac-12, they are basically signing their own death certificate as far as the conference is concerned. And they're walking away from potentially a lot of money here from the other conferences that might want them. Going back to Arizona and Arizona State, if there's credibility to this report that the Board of Regents is holding this up because they want Arizona and Arizona State to stay together, and Arizona State's president is leading the charge to keep the two schools together and to stay in the Pac-12, and the Board of Regents is buying that, I feel like, and I don't know how the Board of Regents is selected in the state of Arizona, but I feel like that's kind of a dereliction of duty if they allow that to happen, because they have a financial responsibility to those universities to make the best business decision possible. That's what this is. Nostalgia be damned. It doesn't matter. That does not matter. There is more money on the table that's guaranteed right now in front of Arizona and probably Arizona State too, to say, you know what, we feel bad about, the Pac-12 and we don't want to walk away and we don't want to be the ones to kill it. And that's not important. What's important is the long-term viability of your athletic programs and the visibility of them in a large conference. Bottom line. And so if there's credibility that the Board of Regents ultimately blocks this and Arizona does not come to the Big 12 and Arizona State stays, I think that's a massive mistake.
Of course it is. It'd be a mistake if Oklahoma legislators and boards of regents blocked OU from going to the SEC. I mean, it would have been a terrible thing for the state to not have Oklahoma in the SEC. Like at some point, Tommy, let's bring this here local. If Kansas gets an offer to go to the Big Ten, which a lot of KU people think could happen someday, I don't think it will, but a lot of people do, then Kansas would face this same situation. Now, Kansas State is in a much stronger position than the first time this got rumored. I think at this point, it'd be like, okay, fine, who cares, right? But the reality is it could face the state of Kansas. Again, I don't think that's ever going to happen. But maybe, whatever. I mean, there's no chance you would block if that happened, you don't block Kansas from that. If they have a chance to go make $50 million a year instead of 30, no, that doesn't make any sense at all. Again, I'm a taxpayer in this state. That would make me angry if that happened. Like, why are we doing that? Does $50 million to Kansas make, well, it won't, but it ought to make tuition cheaper, right? Like, you guys don't need to charge so much for tuition. As a taxpayer, it's like, why would we do that? Why would we do anything to limit something in our state to go be the best it can be? That doesn't make any sense.
They're public universities that are subsidized by the taxpayers.
Right.
And so at that point, and I'm a taxpayer, if I'm in Arizona and paying taxes in that state towards those two universities, I'm going to want those universities to make the best business decision possible. Bottom line. Has nothing to do with nostalgia, has nothing to do with keeping the schools together, whatever. It's the best business decision on the table. And it's not even a question. Like in my mind, there might be people who say, well, maybe they can ultimately make more money down the road with this Apple deal, or maybe they'll be able to get a good offer the next time around or whatever. But none of that is guaranteed. What is guaranteed right now is you join the Big 12. The Big 12 has approved you for membership, and you're getting a full share of $31 million right away. That's guaranteed. It's done. Take the money, take the best business decision, and don't let whatever Michael Crow, the president of Arizona State, dictate the decisions that are made here.
For sure. And it will be a shame for Arizona if they want to go and they can't. Now, if Arizona ultimately decides to stay, okay, that's one thing. I don't think it's the smartest move for Arizona, but okay, I get it. But if they want to go and they're not allowed to go, that's insanity to me. I've said that from the beginning. I said it when we had the OU thing and everyone was like, you just watch. That Oklahoma Board of Regents isn't going to let this happen. And I'm like, are you nuts? Yes, they will. Like, what are they going to say? I will be, if that's how this goes, and it's that Arizona wanted to leave but couldn't leave. And now you're going to hear all kinds of rumors with this too, because, Arizona people are going to say, no, we wanted to stay. And like, it'll be hard to decipher that information. But man, that would suck for Arizona.
So this is really interesting, and it relates back to what we were talking about in the discussion of if this ever happened in the state of Kansas someday. And I don't know exactly how accurate this is, but Mike Vernon, who reports for KU, tweets for KU a lot, talked about the Kansas Board of Regents. He said that there was a policy that was approved by the Kansas Board of Regents last year that requires a school to get approval to even have discussions around leaving the conference. And so he says that KU, if they wanted to go to the Big Ten someday, would have to get approval from the chair of the Kansas State Foundation if they even wanted to have a discussion. And so I don't know how that relates to Arizona and the Board of Regents and how that works and who has final authority. Like, it makes me wonder if can the administrators at the University of Arizona, at the end of the day, can the president just make the call? He is the president of the university, or does the final call rest on the shoulders of the Board of Regents and a vote? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know either. So this also just came down and is relatable, and we're going to have to take a break. Let me tease it here. So according to Sportico, Florida State on the other side of the country taps JP Morgan for an equity raise as a possible path to break grant of rights. What did we talk? Remember when I brought up that Dennis Dodd story the other day?
Oh, man. Yeah.
Florida State might be looking to private equity to raise some money in this situation to get out. And
it's a slippery slope, man. Here we go.
It's a slippery slope, but it throws a wrench if you're looking at Eastern expansion now. And because let's take a break. We're going to take a break. We're going to get into this. This is going to take some time here. And understand that we're digesting this all live on the air. Is this just like bombshell? But before we take a break, let's do one of our giveaways. Let's do some HTO here, Tommy, first. So stay tuned, rock and roll fans, for the opportunity at Def Leppard and Motley Crue. That'll come in our second hour, your chance to win those tickets. But right now, let's give away some HTO. Let's do a coffee and a tea today. We're supposed to cool off, so we'll get some iced coffee, some hot coffee, whatever kind of coffee you want from HTO in Wichita East, and then an iced tea that'll be good for HTO West or East, coming soon in Derby as well. But you'll have the opportunity to go get some of that HTO on us here at Sports Daily, 869-1240. First caller will get those 2 free gifts from HTO. We'll come back. We'll break this down. More giveaways in hour number 2, including those concert tickets. Stick with us on Sports Daily. Now the East Coast fires a news bombshell. We'll get into that next. All right. Steve is our first giveaway winner of the HTO. A little tea, a little coffee for you, Steve. Hope you enjoy it. Lots of great choices in both the coffee world and iced tea world over at HTO, East or West. So it's going to take a little time here to really navigate it. But we heard hints that, college athletics was maybe looking to venture into the world of private investment. Florida State now has been very publicly not happy. We know that there's a $120 million exit fee, though, for the ACC that has really blocked most of these teams. And, man, that deal lasts a really long time out east. So, this has been hinted at. Dennis Dodd has a great story on it. And it would change the landscape of college athletics to begin to blend this a little bit. It's an interesting concept, Tommy. Like if I was a private investor, the thought of this is like, heck yeah, let's go, right? That's a good place to make a long-term investment, right? But the problem is the amateur nonsense that is tried to be clinged to when it comes to the earning potential and the revenue sharing and all of that. Maybe it makes that a little easier. I don't know what it means for college athletics as a whole.
I don't know.
This is interesting.
Yeah, and I don't know what the potential roadblocks are. Like, what kind of authority do the universities have, or the conferences, or even the NCAA? Well, I mean, what they think about this, I have no idea. I mean, it's very early in this. By the way, Dennis Dodd, you mentioned him before. He just tweeted that really, in his mind, this all comes down to nobody wanting to be the first one to make a move. So he's wondering if the Big Ten will want to sweeten the pot for Oregon and Washington, or if Arizona just makes a move. Like, nobody wants to be the first one to move, which I think we've known that all along. But at some point, somebody's just going to have to be like, let's just get it done. Let's go. Let's move on.
Well, right. We got to take a break here. There is so much still to navigate in this. That meeting's happening right now, by the way, in the Pac-12. So this could come at any point, any clarity. We're going to continue to follow it. We got hour number 2 coming up, including that concert giveaway. We appreciate everybody, chiming in on the video stream, on Twitter. You can call into the hotline, 869-1240. Big day for the Big 12, big day for Kansas and Kansas State, as the future could change too. We'll take a quick break. Hour number 2 coming on Sports Daily.
97.5 and 1240 KFH.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily. Okay. This has been wild. So we come into the show today with the thought that the Pac-12 was in real trouble because apparently after the meetings and Arizona was ready to go and everybody looked in this morning, last-ditch effort by the Pac-12, a meeting, and a lot of people reporting that they're going to sign that grant of rights deal. Then insiders sort of to the university saying, well, it's because Arizona wants to leave and Arizona State doesn't want them to leave. So that's the snag out west, Tommy. And we're in that meeting of the Pac-12 right now. And I don't think there's been an update on that in the last 2 minutes. But
there has been. I mean,
okay. Give me that update before
things
we
are coming
get
in
into
left
the
and
other
right.
part of this now.
Pete Thamel, 5 minutes ago, I don't know if you saw this or not, sources indicating that the Pac-12 is unlikely to land the plane this morning and get its media rights deal signed on this call today. Multiple variables at play here, including 11th hour Big Ten push for Oregon and Washington. Everything remains fluid. That was 5 minutes ago.
Okay. Got one for you 8 seconds ago from Brett McMurphy. I wish we could just, but first of all, can we just find the person that's feeding all this information? And just
I love it.
Please? So Brett McMurphy now saying the Pac-12 is unable to get the grant of rights signed this morning and nothing has changed. Okay, so that's what I thought. Remember I said it's probably the Pac-12 feeding this information that, oh yeah, we're about to meet and sign this deal. But it's like, really? Like, that's odd. And then as far as Oregon and Washington joining the Big Ten, McMurphy said that the Ducks and the Huskies are still expected to be Big Ten bound when the finances are worked out. Okay, let's pause. Let's breathe here for a second. So now it seems like nothing has changed since last night.
I got one more, and this was Jason Shear, the Arizona reporter, who tweeted 10 minutes ago that there have been discussions about the Pac-12 and ACC saving each other through a merger.
That seems really complicated right now. But honestly, though, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Like, wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for college athletics. I think the Big 12 is in a position now where even if that happened, the Big 12 would be fine because they could go expand through UConn and San Diego State and whatever and be in Memphis probably and be in a position where they would be fine in that world. But here you mentioned the ACC, and here's why, if that happened, it would be a very different version of the ACC as of, the future. So Florida State, this was coming from Sportico, this story that Florida State is considering tapping JP Morgan for some equity raise with that grant of rights deal. It is, let me go to a board member's. Okay, so that deal for the ACC is ironclad and goes through 2036. That's not a good deal for the schools. So Florida State would have to get through the $120 million exit fee. Here's what Peter Collins, the FSU board chair, said about that on Tuesday. That's the least of my worries based on what we know. We understand it. We've gotten a lot of counsel on that document. That will not be the document that keeps us from taking action, and I'll leave it at that. Then today, we get, and by the way, they got to let the ACC know by August 15th, which is 11 days from now, on whether they want to do this. So here's how, and with a lot of disclaimers when we go through these topics, right? Here's how I would understand that to work. I now am in the business world a little bit. We have our stores, and I'm very novice at understanding this. But what I do know is rich people make a lot of money quickly by being rich because they can invest in things they know are good ideas and then get big returns on that investment. So you can take, capital, basically. Like if you wanted to do something, you take capital from somebody, then you pay that back, plus interest, right? Somebody makes X amount of dollars on top of that later on down the road. They've invested their money in you to be successful so that they can grow that money down the road. At a bird's eye view, that's sort of, at least my basic understanding of it, how that goes. So when you look at college athletics, that's not been done before in college athletics, but it's done now all the time, basically everywhere except the NFL. As I understand it, the NFL doesn't allow that. Pretty much everybody else does, though. And so what you could have, in theory, at its most innocent stage, right, is Florida State saying, all right, we as an institution, and they are able to operate, I believe, in Florida as a nonprofit separately, right? The athletic department separately, and this all on state law. So they could operate separately. They could go take, in theory, a private equity investment from people that have, I'm talking like funny money, Tommy, like just stupid money where they're like, okay, $120 million grant of rights fee. Let's no problem. Because you got to think about like Florida State, let's say if they were in the SEC or the Big Ten, they could be making $30 million more a year over the next 13 years of that deal, right? That's the kind of money overall that's in play, but you'd have to solve 120 million of that. So basically subtract that out. So what you could do if the law allows it, and it sounds like it probably does in Florida, is you could say, okay, private equity firm, whatever it is, Jacob and Tommy's, rich trust fund, whatever. You guys want to give us 120 million. We're going to get out of this deal. You front us that money now. Invest in us. We're going to go sign a new media grant of rights. So on that $120 million, Tommy, we will pay you, let's say you pay an 8 cap or 10% interest on that, right? So 120, let me just pull up my hand, a little calculator here, 120 million at 10%, you've made 12 million back as that private equity group, and they may charge them more interest than that. That's probably a reasonable starting point at 10%, but it's not that much different than taking out a bank loan, right? So you go and you say, all right, give us the $120 million, and you're going to make $12 million back over how I mean, it wouldn't take very long to pay that, that back. So if you were Florida State and you're gaining $30 million, so over, let's say 5 years, right? So you give us $120 million, right? And we're going to pay you back $132 million over 5 years. So if you're Florida State and and the only complication is you got to know you have a spot with one of these two conferences, and that's the part of it that makes it a little tricky. But I don't think Florida State would do this if they didn't know that. But let's say they can go to, we'll just say the SEC and make $30 million more a year. Well, over 5 years, they've made $150 million. They got to pay $132 million back to this private equity group. The private equity group makes their money. In 5 years, they're clear, and now they're making a whole lot more money at Florida State. Right. So that's just like in theory, how at the most basic level that could work if law allowed it. Now, my guess is the private equity group would want more than just that, because that's kind of a lot of money to tie up to get that sort of return. So maybe they want, I don't know, naming rights. I don't know what else you could throw in there to sweeten the pot. But in theory, you could do all of that without it impacting the players on the field or anything like that, and having to just sort of navigate into those waters. If it really was just an investment for money people to get a 10% return on their money, okay, I could see that. And there's probably honestly not even any harm in that, but you'd have to navigate it. Because if it bleeds any more into anything else with the NIL and everything, then you got a little bit of a messy situation.
Let me also bring up another scenario for you. And I understand that college athletics or athletics in general, those are industries that historically appreciate in value. They don't depreciate, right? But I'm just going to throw out this scenario. What happens if Florida State takes money from private investors and the unthinkable happens and they don't land anywhere, or they don't get invitations, or I don't know, something happens to a point to where they can't pay that debt? What kind of collateral is being put up? How does that work? How does a university or an athletic department put up collateral to make a private investor feel comfortable in this? Is it unsecured? Is it secured? I don't know. Can JP Morgan foreclose on the athletic department at Florida State? Can they take over running and all of a sudden it's Florida State owned by JP Morgan? I think that's unlikely. That's rare, but man, it's certainly conversations that I think need to be had before any of this even happens.
It is, but if you go to the Sportico article, they cite all kinds of places where these equity funds invest. Like the San Antonio Spurs have taken an equity investment. Nobody owns the Spurs. The Spurs ownership didn't change. I always try to, and it's the only way I can get a good understanding of this. I don't know what skill sets I have in life, Tommy, but like processing and regurgitating information is one that you have to have in the news business, right? You have to be able to take information, process it, and just sort of try to make it relatable. In a normal business world, like if I went and took, you can give up ownership stakes too, by the way. Sometimes that's what people want. Like they want ownership stakes. I don't know that you would have to go that route here, right? Like you don't have to. So if I went and I said, I need some money to open my business, somebody could come to me and say, I'll give you the money, but I want 10% ownership. Well, I would never do that, right? Because I don't want to give up that ownership. I would say, no, I'll just give you more money back, right? You just be the bank for me. You be the bank. You can make some money, but I'm not going to give you any ownership. So, and at that point, that investor would have a decision to make. And, a smart investor is always going to want ownership in something they think is going to be successful. So they're going to come in and say, yeah, we'll give you $120 million, but we need to be ownership here. Well, I don't think it's that simple in this world.
Yeah.
And so it can be as simple as a return on your money. And I use the 10% number, Tommy. Like these equity funds, I believe, are just a lot of rich people's money sort of put together to grow money and get a return. And then the managers of those funds make gobs of money, right? Because they're making everybody else money. But let's say it was 20% even, Tommy. And it was Like, let's say we want 20 million back. So 12 million becomes 24 million over 5 years. If you're Florida State and you know you have a place in one of these leagues, that's an easy debt to pay. Easy debt to pay.
But the one variable that comes into play, because it's not totally all in the hands of Florida State. Like, they don't get to dictate everything. The conference has a role in that, and the other schools, whatever conference they end up in, and the networks have a major say in this also. What happens if the amount of money that networks are willing to pay conferences and schools hits a peak, it plateaus, and it doesn't go any higher? And all of a sudden, you've got all these different schools that are indebted to private equity firms in the hopes and in the thought that, oh, ESPN's going to be there. Well, ESPN laid off a bunch of people not that long ago. Oh, Fox is going to be there. NBC is going to be there. Streaming platforms are going to be there. Is that number going to continue to go up? For sure. Do we know that? We don't know that. It could very easily hit a peak at some point. And so if you've got Florida State kind of being that first one to take the plunge, I would imagine you'll see other schools that will try to do it at varying levels with varying returns and all of that. I just worry that if we get into a place where college athletics, there are tons of creditors that are looking for their money back, I don't think it's going to go perfectly in every scenario. And I would be very cautious on pursuing this.
So the SEC deal runs through 2034, which is just under what the ACC is currently. The Big Ten's is a 7-year deal, right, which starts this year, I think. So that would be a little bit less. So I don't know which league Florida State thinks it's going to get into. I don't know if it's the Big Ten or the SEC. But you can, number one, you can make the money back you'd owe within reason on just somebody helping you with the grant of rights. Like, if it's just that, if it's just simply, hey, we just need to fundraise $120 million to get this grant of rights deal done, and we'll pay you interest on that fundraising, that honestly wouldn't be that hard to do for the money we're talking about. Either place they would go, because they're not doing this, right, unless it's Big Ten or SEC. Either of those places, though, could get them out of that. I wouldn't worry too much about there are two places where advertisers get peak and premium value. When was the last time the price of Super Bowl ads went down, Tommy? I mean, we're about to get a how many teams are we going to the playoffs? We're about to get an 8-team 12-team college football playoff. The money's not going down, right? And at some point, if you're the equity fund, you incur the risk of a default too, right? And you just put language in there. These equity funds don't invest in things that don't succeed very often. That's why they get invested in. That's why they're willing to do it. But there's going to be language in there, that these universities have to protect themselves. That would be so far from the list of my concerns that they don't have the opportunity to at least basically pay that loan back. There are two places where advertisers can still, in my opinion, get absolute premium value for their dollars. Sports, because people watch it live, and news, because people watch it live, right? Anything that you watch live that can't be like fast forwarded, and even that we're going to see die at some point, by the way, Tommy. Like, you're going to get force-fed ads on some of this, because Netflix, unless it just keeps driving subscription rates so high, and it's even offering it now, right? A discounted rate, but you got to take ads to do that, right? So I wouldn't worry just too much about media rights deals going down. Now, there may be fewer of them. And
I don't think they're going to go down, but they might hit a plateau.
If they hit a plateau, the plateau is great where it is right now. I don't think they're going to do that either. They're going to go up naturally. They always go up, right? It would take something so, catastrophic for that not to happen, that all of this is going to be the least of our concerns. That money's going to go up. It always has. It's like the stock market, right? Like, yeah, don't freak out because it always goes up. It does. Look at history. Like, it takes dips and then it eventually gets a whole lot higher down the road. You just have to ride it out. And these people have so much money, they could absolutely ride it out. And the other thing that's interesting about these private equity things is everybody likes to be involved in sports. I think there's a little more forgiveness there than if I failed as a business owner, because you're in the luxury suite and you're getting access and you're having fun with it. It's almost like hobby driven to some degree on this too. Like, hey, this portion, it's about, this group of investors is going to be a bunch of Florida State alumni, and we're going to give them a booth every game, and they're going to get whatever access they want. They're going to have fun with this, and they're going to do all these things. There's going to be a little more forgiveness, I would think, cooked in too in that way. But I wouldn't worry about paying that $120 million. If, again, we're creating a hypothetical here that's what they would want, is $120 million to break the deal. That is not going to be a problem to be repaid if the Big Ten or the SEC is on the table, because college sports is slowly but surely exploding. And if you're one of the haves, you're going to make lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of money. We're expanding the playoff. That's going to make everybody a whole lot more money. We're narrowing, the networks are sort of narrowing in on what they want to invest in. That's going to mean more for the haves and less for the have-nots, right? That's been everybody's concern from the beginning. It'll be too hard to be competitive and all of these things. But it's the reality of the situation. If you've got a place in the Big Ten or the SEC, you're not going to make less money 5 years from now when the deals are up. You'll at least make what you're making now and probably more, because that's the play. ESPN has shown us time and time and time and time again, as they're laying everybody off, they're investing as much money as they've ever invested in anybody in Pat McAfee, right? Like they're willing to go big for the things that they're going to make money with, and less willing to continue things that don't make them money, right? Like, so the status quo, it's why the Pac-12 doesn't have a media deal right now. If there's not an appetite for Pac-12 football because there's not eyeballs, we'd just rather not, we don't want to make a half-hearted investment. Let's just invest more in the SEC, right? That's simple stuff. And it ain't going to go down if you get into the Big Ten or the SEC right now.
The very latest report from Jason Shear, the Arizona reporter, says that sources indicate that Washington is very concerned with the Apple deal and that Arizona and Arizona State are still on track to join the Big 12. The president of Arizona State, Michael Crow, is proving to be a stumbling block, but parties involved are confident it can be overcome. That was 5 minutes ago.
I think our logic was right when we started this, because the news of this Pac-12 meeting today, where all the Pac-12 people were like, it's a meeting to sign the grant of rights deal. That's what it is, right? Because obviously the Pac-12 is telling them that. It didn't make any sense to me, because why would Washington and Oregon do that? Because they know they're going to have a spot, whether it's in the Big 10 or the Big 12. Big 12 would take them in a second. And then why all of a sudden would Arizona not want to go? Like, what has changed that would want to keep Arizona without? Because if Washington and Oregon were staying, I would say, okay, that's somewhat feasible, even though I don't like the streaming only option. But even then, like, we know this, they've got to know this. Like, guys, Washington and Oregon are going to leave at the absolute first opportunity it makes financials. They're not going to get stuck in streaming only games. They're not. We can't be. Like, those two schools are not going to do this they'll do it for as little amount of time as they possibly can. So everything's back to where it was last night, outside of the Pac-12 feeding a bunch of information out that, oh yeah, we're going to get together and we're going to save this thing with the exact same deal everybody hated 3 days ago. That was the breaking news this morning. And it caught us because everybody was on it. And it's like, okay, that, maybe this travel thing is costing a lot of money. So I did see, Tommy, and I don't remember who had it now, it's all blending together, that one of the issues for Washington and Oregon is there is a little resistance. You asked this question from the other member schools about having to potentially travel out there now.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think the negotiation is probably happening, and why we're seeing the option of lower revenue. Although here's what I don't understand. Why would Washington and Oregon making less money financially benefit the other schools? They don't have to give up any money to add Washington and Oregon. So Is it strictly competitive? We're like, yeah, we'll take them, but we got to travel out there, so we want them at a disadvantage. I don't quite understand why that would matter, because it's not like they have to give up money. They nothing changes for them.
They're already going to USC and UCLA. I mean, that's
now
already
they
there.
Think about going 3 or 4 times instead of 1 or 2.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense. Like, regardless of how this all pans out, we are going to see different conferences have different divisions and whatever to alleviate some of those travel concerns. So, I mean, I think you're going to see USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington all play each other and try to limit the travel back and forth from one coast to the other. Like, those things are all manageable in the case of both the Big Ten and the Big 12. They're all manageable when you put schedules together. Neither one of those things, in my mind, should be the final stumbling block or final hurdle for getting this done. Like, it shouldn't stop everything, because all it's going to take is some creative scheduling, and everybody should be good. The other point I want to make is, I don't know what you think about this, but to me, it certainly seems like maybe some of these national reporters got worked a little bit this morning.
No, they didn't. No, they're not doing anything wrong. Look, they're giving us the latest information on what they're hearing. I'm not. I hope I didn't come across as like trying to sound negative to all the the reporters. They're doing their jobs. Absolutely. It is an absolute asset that we have them connected. That's not what I meant at all. It's like when it's like when contracts come out for coaches or players. I just, like, agents are feeding that information, right? Like, that's agents giving that to these guys because they're using it as a negotiation tool. But it's still information we want to have, right, Tommy? So with these reports this morning, they're clearly like the same whatever is I got a text list, and I'm like, well, let me text this person that, hey, we're getting together. We think they're gonna, we think we're gonna sign a deal today. Well, that's obviously people that are optimistic to the Pac-12, and it is my obligation, if I'm a reporter and a high-ranking source of information is giving me that information, I want to tell people, like, hey, here's what these people are telling me this morning. This would be wild and crazy, but here's the last minute, and they're obviously getting it from more than one place, but they're all getting it that way. And I like to just say, well, where's that information coming from? Well, it's clearly coming from pro Pac-12 people, because it doesn't make sense to the rest of us. And now we're seeing, of course, that was an overly optimistic take by somebody. And I do think that there is a roller coaster nature to this too, because you either sent this to me, Tommy, or I just saw it. Like, Oregon still came in and was like, don't like it. So yeah, they had the meeting. Yeah, they were optimistic about the meeting, but the same concerns are there. And there's some stalling that's happening and all kinds of crazy stuff in there. Crazy. Okay, so let's take a break. We're not going to give away the rock and roll tickets just yet, Def Leppard. We're going to hang on to those. And so that tells you, if you're a listener, you're narrowing in on when that's going to be. So know that it's not now, but it'll be before the end of the show. Instead, let's give away some Win Surge vouchers real quick, Jad. A 4-pack of Surge vouchers to any remaining home game. You pick the game. You can go on us here at Sports Daily. So first caller, 869-1240, that IHOP hotline. Stay tuned for our other big giveaway, which is Def Leppard and Motley Crue tickets. But right now, we're giving away Win Surge vouchers. 869-1240. We'll come back and have more on this breaking news situation in the world of college sports on Sports Daily. Okay, welcome back in, everybody. As we make our way through it, congratulations to Jeremy there on the win. Sorry. This is the craziest day, Tommy. Like, absolute craziest days. Trying to navigate these giveaways. It's like the kids get to know who their teachers are. So, like, my wife keeps messaging me. It's like, will you look? She's at work. She's HTO right now. And she's like, will you look and see who the teachers are? And I'm like, I can't. Like, there is so much happening right now. Like, I can't go to the other computer where this is logged in and look. So I'd like ran to the other room there to try and catch that and let her know and try to like guess at who this is. That's because this has been a nuts day with this conference realignment. And man, I think as the dust settles, Tommy, where this all will end up is where it sort of was last night, right? And, the Pac-12 got together again today to try and save this thing. And I think that had optimism within the league that maybe they could, but it sure doesn't sound like now that meeting's over that's going to happen. And I think at this point, it's where it was. So, which is that Oregon and Washington are trying to figure out the last minute financials of going to the Big Ten. And if that happens, you'll see at least Arizona come over and probably Arizona State and Utah. Utah's been dead silent. Utah's interesting in this. I honestly, Tommy, I think I'm the most excited about Arizona because I'm such a college basketball fan. But overall, like as far as like the product on the field, I'm probably the most excited about Utah. The potential of making Utah and BYU play each other every year, even though like there's so much hostility there. I love that. I love it. Like I love that they'll have to be forced to play each other. And we go to the state of Utah for this great rivalry that probably would enhance the league. I mean, I think it really would. Like the product on the field is always going to be the Big 12's greatest attribute. It's not, I don't think, going to be so much, Tommy, of like exposure and all of these things. But man, the product on the field, the product on the court, all of these things is going to be fantastic. And I wonder how much pressure do you think there is on your mark right now? What if this doesn't get done? What if the expansion doesn't happen? I do think that dims the future a little bit. I'm optimistic that it'll happen. I think that it will happen for the Big 12. I think it'll be great. And I think it's, the most significant and next step to the greater expansion that they want to do at the next deal with college basketball and all of these things. But I do think it's pretty critical for that future of the Big 12 that they're able to get this done, at least with Arizona.
I don't know. I mean, I think that they're good regardless. Like I didn't.
Well, but are they going to be good in 5 years?
I think so because what Yormark has done is he's built contingency plans. He's been very clear about kind of spreading both West and East, right? So UConn has been mentioned, Gonzaga has been mentioned, Memphis has been mentioned, San Diego State has been mentioned. There have been several teams that have been mentioned as part of the Big 12. Now, of course, I think you would love to have obviously Arizona and Arizona State and Utah, Oregon. You'd like to have that, right? But even if they get none of it, I think that they're okay. And what I've loved about all of this is in the last, 48 hours or so, the Big 12 has been quiet. And that's what I love the most because they're working behind the scenes. They're not in a position like the Pac-12 where they've got to leak a bunch of stuff to media members and, the Big Ten having all these negotiations with Oregon and Washington because they can't offer a full share. And what does that look like? The Big 12, their deal is set. They know that the schools that they extend an invitation to are going to get a full share. It's very simple. It's very easy. And Yormark, and he's been very vocal up to this point. He's been very quiet in this the last couple of days. I like that. To me, that shows that he's strategizing and working behind the scenes.
Okay. So yeah. Stuart Mandel now reporting if Oregon is truly on the fence, and he was very, very there are Big 12 fans are not happy with him, the way he described the league, and I get it. I don't take personal offense like that, but he said if Oregon's truly on the fence and the money isn't that different, one thing they have to be considering, much better chance of regular CFP appearances in a smaller Pac-9 10 than an 18-team Big 10.
No,
No.
there's no logic to that.
None whatsoever. Why would they be thinking that? Why would they be thinking that? The Pac-12 has arguably in a lot of years been more competitive than the Big 10. Outside of Michigan and Ohio State, you might play one of them in a year. You beat them, you're in. Like the Big 10 isn't this, it's not like the SEC. And by the way, Texas and Oklahoma just left for the SEC, where their chances in this pretend scenario you just invented of the CFP, that's only relevant for like one more year. When this thing goes to 8, there is no guarantee, remember, that conference champions get in.
Yeah.
The Pac-9 or whatever it is going to have as good a chance of getting somebody in the CFP as the American. No, there is no, and that's why they did this, Tommy. That's why they put that provision in there, because again, if you're in the SEC and the Big 10, you can see the future right now, and you do not want a guaranteed spot for a 2-loss Pac-9 team to get into the CFP. Absolutely not. I don't agree with that in any way. That has not even entered the conversation.
It's not about conference champions anymore. It can't be, because the conferences as they stand right now, this second, there's so much disparity. So you can't elevate the Pac-12 conference champion to be on the same par as the SEC conference champion. Doesn't work that way anymore. It's got to come down to just overall schedule, strength of schedule, win-loss record, all that stuff. One other thought that I just had as we're talking about this, can you imagine in the very near future, there's going to be a scenario where the Rose Bowl will not feature the Pac-12? Like the Rose Bowl stadium will not have a Pac-12 team in it, right? I mean, more than likely, like if we get to that point, that just blows my mind. You know, the most quintessential Pac-12 event, the Rose Bowl parade, and, you know, the Conference of Champions and all this illustrious history gone out the window. And I know that there are people that are clinging on to nostalgia and they're clutching their pearls, and how dare, you know, the sanctity of the Pac-12 be threatened. It's a business, man, and there's a lot of money that goes into it. And I'm a free market guy, just like you are. These schools are going where they're wanted and where they can make the most amount of money.
Yeah. Like, of course it is. But again, back to the original point of like getting caught off guard this morning and saying maybe this thing will hold together. Total money matters too, right? Like if you're making 30 million but spending 29, it's better to make 25 and spend 20. You know what I mean? Like profit margin matters. So that's why you're seeing some like negotiation here to some degree. I'm certain that Oregon's saying, all right, look, you want to offer us a lesser share, factor in that we got to pay X amount of dollars more in travel, and let's make up the difference that way. So if you want to only offer us, let's say it's 35 instead of 50, but we got to incur 10 million more in travel, right? So we were already at 25 plus 10 is the 35 you're offering. That's no net gain for us. Offer us 40 instead of 50. Right? Like that is probably the negotiation that's happening right now. But no, I don't think that Oregon's sitting there in its meeting saying, gosh, you know what? We probably are going to have a better chance to get into that 8-team CFP if we're playing Stanford instead of Rutgers. Let's try to calculate that. What would our chances be of getting into a no auto bid CFP if we can roll through a cake Pac-12 versus a instead of playing Iowa next year? Like we have a much better chance of beating Arizona State than Iowa. No, come on. That's you're clinging to straws here with that kind of stuff. That's not a part of this. They don't.
The only way that logic would make sense is if the BCS was still in place. You know, and you've got a computer determining your strength of schedule and your quality wins and all of that. Those days are done. And that's why, you know, all this playoff expansion and All of this is fundamental seismic changes in college athletics. And, as we look at realignment, as we look at expanded playoff, NIL, all these things, even maybe private equity into college athletics, all those things by themselves are monumental, but they all work together. There's interplay in all of them. And I don't know how long down the line, maybe 2025 is probably when, the dust settles and everybody's kind of safely in their new homes and we know exactly what that's going to look like. Will we know the true ramifications of all of this? But all these things play into one another. But no, I mean, there's no way that Oregon is sitting back and saying, oh man, sure, I don't know, we might want to stay in the Pac-9 because that's going to give us a better chance to go. No, that's ridiculous.
Come on now. That's clinging to straw. It's grasping. Here we go. Let's Chad, hit that music a little louder for us here. Just a little appetizer. Def Leppard, Motley Crue, the World Tour coming to H.A. Chapman Stadium in Tulsa, August 16th. Special guest Alice Cooper. You can get tickets to that, by the way, at Ticketmaster.com. It's on the campus of the University of Tulsa, or better yet, right now, you got a chance to win a free pair of tickets on us at KFH and Sports Daily. Here we go. Third caller during this break, 869-1240 to the IHOP hotline. We'll go see Def Leppard and Motley Crue and Alice Cooper on us. Let's take the break. Let's get the winner. We'll be back with more Sports Daily right after this. All right, Zach is our big winner of the Def Leppard and Motley Crue tickets. Congratulations to Zach. He'll head to Tulsa to watch that concert on us on August 16th. You can get tickets at Ticketmaster.com, or we will continue to give away a pair of tickets every day for the next handful next week until we are out. That'd be, what would that be, Jad? One a day, every day next week? I believe that's correct. One pair, I should say. One pair of tickets each day next week. So make sure you're listening to Sports Daily. All right. So we had lots of winners. We got all our winners, Zach and Jeremy and Steve, all winners today of prize giveaways as we try to navigate. We don't often, Tommy, get like a one-topic show in. This is so crazy.
Yeah.
But hey, that's the way this thing has gone. Real quick, Royals. Tommy, the Royals are streaking. Just a couple of minutes with them here today, as you'll hear them later today on the streak. This has been fun. Like, it's been fun to watch the Royals the past week. 6 days in a row, they've been winners, or 6 games, 2 series in a row, and now they get to go to Philadelphia on the road and try and keep it going.
Yeah, I mean, they are they're in a position now where I think that you can start to get some momentum in place, and they've already got that a little bit. At this point, I know that the Mets are, incredibly disappointing right now. They're reeling. They sold off basically everybody at the trade deadline, and the vibes are not good around the Mets organization. So it was good timing for the Royals to play them, because the Mets organization is not good right now. They were able to sweep them. At this point, I mean, if you can just kind of re-energize the fan base a little bit, in the next, you have like a window of a couple of weeks here before people really start to get into Chiefs football. If you can get them excited a little bit right now about the Royals, you're going to build that momentum in the next season.
There's no question about it. And it's not just that they're winning. It's that they're winning as Bobby Witt Jr.'s hair is on fire.
Yep.
That Brady Singer gave you a fantastic start last night. 8 innings, only 3 hits allowed. It's that they got a fantastic start the night before from another young pitcher in Cole Reagans. Like, there are things that we can look at down the road and say, okay, this isn't bare bones here. Maybe there's an opportunity to get something together. They did hang on to Salvador Perez. Who knows what Zach Greinke wants to do? maybe there's still a world where they can have a good offseason, bring in a couple of handy veterans, and just get competitive at least next year while they continue to have to foundationally rebuild this thing, which is always going to be the frustrating part because they shouldn't need to be doing this still. But at least you can hang your hat. Like if Bobby Witt Jr. stays like this the rest of the way, Tommy, he is enough to be excited about. He is that kind of player.
So they have 52 games left. If they play 500 ball the rest of the way, they're 26-26. Let's just say if they do that, they're still going to lose 100 games, but it's only 101. They would finish 61 and 101, which is a whole heck of a lot better than where they were, projected a couple of weeks ago, winning only, 40 some games or maybe 50 if they were lucky and threatening the most losses in history kind of thing. If they can play 500 ball, and with the way that Bobby Witt Jr. has come in, some of the pitching over the last week has pitched, I think 500 ball should be a reasonable expectation for them down the stretch.
Yeah. Yeah. That would need to be over 2 months. Gosh. I mean, that should be a goal. I'll call it a goal. I'm not going to call it an expectation. 500 ball for this team is going to depend a lot on who they play. But quite frankly, I mean, they've swept, now they swept the Mets here. Okay. Let's see what they do against the Phillies. That would be amazing if they played 500 ball down the stretch. I do think we got to be a little careful with that because if they run into some buzzsaws there, that's going to be pretty difficult to do. What a crazy show today. My head's spinning a little bit. 869-1240 is that IHOP hotline. We're going to tell you what's coming up this weekend. I think we have stayed clear of big bombs of the last 10 minutes or so in realignment. So if not, we'll take one final look and get you ready for the weekend in that world as well. Sports Daily coming right back.
Join
All right, everybody. Woo! That was a fun one. That was a fun one. Okay. We got a busy weekend here coming up because the Royals are front and center on this win streak. So you've got regular programming today until 6. That's when the Royals coverage begins against Philly. Then at 5 on Saturday, 12:30 on Sunday. I would suspect that there's a lot of information coming throughout the day here on this conference realignment. I would suspect that these people don't want to deal with this through the weekend. So we'll have it all recapped for you on Monday. Wild and crazy. Congratulations to all our winners. For Jad Chambers and Tommy Castor, I'm Jacob Albracht. We will see you on
Sports,
Monday.
later news, and great comedy with Bob and Tom Mornings, 97.5 and 12.